Today is Monday, April 7th, 2025. It's 5:30 PM. And first up on the agenda, item A, Brian McCain, Chief of Staff.
Thank you, sir. City updates, Pueblo Parks and Rec. Candy and plastic egg donations are needed for El Centro del Quinto Sol's Easter celebration. 2 donation drop-off locations are El Centro, Monday through Thursday, 3 to 8 p.m., or Friday, 12 to 8 p.m., or Saturday, 12 to 6 p.m. You could also drop them off at the Parks and Rec Admin Office in City Park, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. The Easter celebration will be held Saturday, April 19th from 12 to 2 p.m. It's a free event with games, crafts, and outdoor activities for all ages. City Park and Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan Survey. The City of Pueblo Parks and Rec Department and the Pueblo Conservancy District are seeking public input regarding the Pueblo City Park and Arkansas River Corridor Plan. The joint project with the master plan seeks to include enhancement of the Arkansas River Corridor from Pueblo Lake Dam to Runyon Lake. Individuals interested in submitting input may do so by visiting the City of Pueblo website, just pueblo.us, under the Parks and Rec Department tab, or by scanning the QR code up on the screen, which Clyde has now. Housing and Urban Development Fund Survey. Have you taken the survey to help the City of Pueblo was to develop its 5-year consolidated plan to decide how to use federal housing and urban development HUD funds to support low and moderate income residents with housing, public services, and infrastructure. The survey doesn't take very long and we want your feedback. Check the city's social media channels, including Facebook, Nextdoor, X, formerly Twitter, and LinkedIn to provide your feedback. The Romeros will not be able to get on tonight. They have a prior commitment with everything speeding up in the legislature, but there's a few updates I wanted to give you. Our lobbying team, along with Mayor Graham and us, we're working actively to broaden the coalition, urging governor to veto the municipal court legislation, which was House Bill 1147 and Senate Bill 62 that council and the mayor were both opposed to. The House is expected to take up the budget, the long bill, this week, following its passage in the Senate, of which it did pass. We anticipate the House will pass it by the end of the week or early next week. The lobbying team requests that council members review the report that was sent out today, particularly regarding newly introduced legislation, SB 25-276 and House Bill 25-1295. And please provide any feedback or questions on the 2 bills. And just to go a little bit further into that, we're on day 90 of the legislative session. There's 30 days left. Leadership just indicated that they will begin weekend work now, which we already saw this last weekend. So instead of just meeting Monday through Friday, they're doing up to 7 days a week. The Senate did pass the $43.9 billion state budget, which includes $16.7 billion from the general fund. The budget will also allocate an additional $150 million for K-12 education in the upcoming fiscal year. That was kind of a topic of discussion and concern when they decided to fund K-12 fully. And then there's a budget fall, but they are going to put the $150 million in it. And now the long bill, which is the budget, moves to the House for debate, and we expect the state budget to be finalized by early next week. Just an update on the 2 municipal court bills. Senate Bill 62, the failure to appear charges in municipal court. Again, this bars municipality and municipal courts from filing criminal charges and imposing jail sentences solely for failure to appear. It did pass both chambers and is headed to the governor's desk. This is one that a letter will be going out to ask the governor to veto. The delegation vote here in Pueblo, I'll just lay this out. Rep Martinez voted yes, Rep Morrow voted yes, Rep Luck voted no, Rep Winter voted no, and Senator Hendrickson voted yes on this to pass it. The other bill that we've been talking about is House Bill 25-1147, the Fairness and Transparency in Municipal Court. What this does, again, it just aligns sentencing and penalties for municipal offenses to state offenses. There's no comparable state level offense. The max sentence is capped at the same limit as a state level penalty. This is the one that basically takes away our ability to have ordinances such as illegal dumping, theft from merchant, and strips that ability away from the city to charge offenders under that. That did pass the Senate 24-11 and the House 37-27. Again, the Pueblo delegation vote, Rep Martinez voted yes, Rep Morrow voted yes, Rep Luck voted no, Rep Winter voted no, and Senator Hendrickson voted yes. This is another one that we will be asking the governor to veto. He actually came out in opposition of this. And when we went through a committee hearing on it, he sent somebody to testify in opposition on it. The two new bills they asked you to look at, if you review what was sent, is Senate Bill 25-276, preventing civil rights violations, immigration status, and House Bill 25-1295, which is the food truck operations. The food truck one we were watching, we thought it was dead because there was no sponsor on the Senate, but I think they snuck it in. So as of 45 minutes ago, I have everybody on the Pueblo side from sales tax to legal looking at it to see how it'll impact Pueblo and our rules and regulations regarding food trucks operating here. What the bill does is basically if you have a food truck from another city or jurisdiction, if they have permits for that, this will allow them to come in and operate here without going through our permitting process. So it's basically you get a permit for your food truck and you have a permit for the entire state. There are some steps in it. And again, I just looked at it that says we still have to approve it, but it's fire, health, and a business license. So I'll have more information on that probably tomorrow and send something out, how that impacts us. And unless there's any questions, that concludes my update.
Anybody? We good? Okay, next up is excuse me, Ms. Martinez, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not necessarily with Mr. McCain, but I don't see in front of me the work session schedules that we normally have. I know that I've submitted a couple of requests to you, Mr. Chair, one about Prop 123, one about the upcoming River Festival that the city is going to be hosting for the first time ever. It's a grant from the Office of Economic Development. And I want to just make sure that they're scheduled.
Okay. I gotta find out more. I had taken this last week off, but I can find out by tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? Next up, item agenda B, the GDS Municipalization Survey Update. Andrew Hayes, Public Works Director, Matthew Butler, Principal, GDS Associates, Garrett Cole, Vice President, GDS Associates, in a 20-minute presentation. Welcome, folks.
Good evening, Mayor Graham, councilors, and members of the public. Tonight's presentation marks an important step in the city's ongoing evaluation of electric utility service in Pueblo. As you know, in 2024, the city engaged the consulting firm GDS Associates to conduct a preliminary feasibility study examining the potential for the city of Pueblo to acquire the electric utility infrastructure currently owned by Black Hills Energy with the goal of establishing a municipal or public utility. The focus of that study has been to assess whether such a transition would be financially and operationally feasible, beginning with an analysis of acquiring only those assets located within the city's jurisdiction. The results of that work, along with key findings and considerations for future action, are going to be presented this evening. As Councilor Gomez mentioned, we are joined tonight by representatives from GDS Associates, Matthew Butler, Principal at GDS, Garrett Cole, Vice President at GDS, who will be presenting virtually tonight. I see also they're joined by Sahabia Ahmed from GDS as well. They're going to walk us through their preliminary analysis and key takeaways, and we'll reserve time following their presentation for questions and discussion. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Cole and Mr. Butler.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, and good afternoon. See, well, this is introductory. Thanks for the time today. Thanks for allowing us to share these findings of our municipalization feasibility assessment. As you've heard, my name is Matthew Butler. I'm joined by my colleague Garrett Cole, who will also be presenting tonight. You can just hit slideshow. From beginning.
And we're pulling up the slides still. Give us just a moment. All right, looks like the slides are up on the screen on this end.
I think that looks fine for us. If we want to go to the first slide. Yep.
We're on the project scope slide. Feel free to proceed.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, to start off, allow me a moment to recognize the specific project scope and the means for which we are prescribing feasibility in our assessment. The project scope is to conduct a high-level feasibility analysis of municipalizing Black Hills, Colorado's assets, focusing on financial, operational, and technical considerations. The basis of feasibility in our study is if prospective public power customer rates are equal to or less than forecasted Black Hills energy rates, the public power utility is deemed feasible. Next slide. Okay, so as we completed our analysis, the conclusions, as one might expect, really came down to 3 or 4 key variables and their outcomes. Those 3 or 4 key variables are loosely described in this slide. The first one, we have the Black Hills energy forecast. We've gotten that from what was utilized in the most recent PUC approved rates for 2025. Second is the methodology for establishing valuation for the assets to be acquired. Methodologies in circumstances such as this can produce a range of outcomes with industry norms starting at book value and rising as high as what we call reproduction cost new less depreciation. In this case, we used a Black Hills depreciation study, cost of service study, and a well-recognized utility cost index called Handy-Whitman to develop the valuation of the assets to be acquired. Next, of course, we have the cost of power supply and any associated stranding associated with those assets or contracts. These also play a very big part in this assessment. And for that, we reviewed current market resource alternatives to build estimates. Lastly, establishing the territory of customers and assets to be required or to be acquired was required. This was done using Black Hills publicly available data, maps, and of course, knowing where the city limits exist. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, I mentioned 4 key variables. Let's dig into how those 4 variables influence feasibility. So I already mentioned rates. As one would intuitively assume, as Black Hills rates increase, the case for feasibility of the municipal utility improves. For this assessment, we're using the most recent approved forecast, though it would not be unexpected for Black Hills to go back to the commission for larger increases in the near term, and that, of course, would change the perspective of feasibility moving forward. Secondly, valuation. When the valuation of the plant to be acquired increases, that requires the amount of debt service that the city has to take on to establish municipalization, and that also decreases feasibility, of course. In our assessment, the base case utilizes an average of book value and reproduction cost new less depreciation, which is reasonable for a transaction such as this. As for the power supply, the consideration of stranded costs are really important. Given the expectation for the Black Hills resource portfolio to have favorable marketability due to a constrained resource capacity environment, we're assuming no stranded costs or credits in our base case assessment. For this study, and based on the commission scope as described earlier, we focused on assessing the feasibility of the city acquiring the territory specifically within the city limits. However, larger or a full territory acquisition and associated distribution, transmission, and generation assets could produce a potentially more favorable feasibility perspective. But at the end of the day, as we consider these 3 different inputs to our base case assessment, it produces a result that isn't quite economically feasible based on the metric we're using relative to forecasted rates. All right, next slide. All right, let's look at the territory we've been discussing. Black Hills Energy Colorado serves approximately 100,000 electric accounts within the footprint seen in the map, and approximately half of those exist within the Pueblo city limits. As previously mentioned, acquiring the entire territory of Black Hills Energy could change feasibility and the overall outcome. Next slide. Drilling in, when looking more specifically at the city limits and thinking about the acquisition area, separating into two distinct systems to allow for formation of the public power utility and any required reintegration is important to consider in any transaction or circumstance like this. In this case, the analyzed costs to support these efforts are, as I would call, relatively small when compared to the overall size of the transaction, and therefore do not significantly impact overall feasibility in this case. All right, next slide.
All right, I'll take over here. This is Garrett Cole. Want to talk about one of the key drivers that have been reviewed here, the power supply costs. In looking back at the 2019 study that we performed at the time and thinking about that here today in 2025, a number of key variables have changed in the market. We'll be talking about these key variables on this slide and the next. One, increased energy market prices. We've had increased volatility in the market for energy supply compared to that time several years back in completing that study, as well as some regional supply constraints. This has increased the price of energy, as well as the forward market prices that we would use in assessing this potential forward cost for energy prices. In addition to that, resource adequacy is a common term in the industry. It essentially means the capacity to serve your electric requirements at times of peak demand. That capacity has escalated in cost during this period in a significant manner. This has been true throughout the United States, but is true there locally in Colorado as well. Increased reliance on renewables that are intermittent with lower accreditation for capacity value is a big part of this, as well as rising capacity prices in bilateral markets. With markets being a bit more constrained in the present day, prices have risen in suit with that. So we're seeing a much more constrained capacity market, and those costs are reflected in a more significant manner here in 2025. Additionally, there's been retirement of other older resources on the system, reducing available supply, which only puts more pressure on those new resources or renewables coming online that have less capacity value. So overall, the capacity requirements cost from a newer standpoint for resources has certainly increased. We do have Pueblo modeled at a 50% renewable supply going forward. I did want to call that out as it's an important assumption to the future, but I will say that doesn't harm significantly the economics in our review. It doesn't represent some significant price premium. In fact, that may very well bring a nice profile feature to the overall plan going forward if it were to be implemented. So I did want to highlight or underscore that notion. Energy and capacity costs being a key element, what's driven costs up in the current market. Next slide, please. A little bit more detail on that. In 2019, the all-in wholesale power costs, which included the four components shown below, was 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour. That of course, as we're showing here, just as an order of magnitude, has approximately doubled in almost all these cases for the different components of cost. Energy significantly higher at this point in time. As I just mentioned, capacity or resource adequacy, much higher at this point in time to procure that capacity in the market. transmission costs have also been increasing at a very significant rate, and ancillary and other administrative costs about the same relative to the last study. All in all, however, with that last component being a smaller piece, the total power cost is also in that same order of magnitude, about approximately in the range of double where we were in last review. So with those in mind, that's certainly affecting the overall power supply costs that Pueblo could expect to have to pay in order to procure power supply, in addition to the stated acquisition costs that would be there for the system. Was there a question?
No, you're fine. Please keep going.
All right, let's go to the next slide. We wanted to provide here essentially a heat map, helping to understand the relative contribution of various variables in these initial feasibility results. Matthew pointed out there's several variables here that have a key standing on the overall economic feasibility. As we look at this, we're thinking of the forward impact of Black Hills rate forecast, or their retail rates. Based on the most recent rate case, we've incorporated those. Also, we're looking at any potential impact associated with power supply stranding. That's the generation assets that Black Hills may, has today in its portfolio, what the go forward value of those assets might be, and how they're impacted at the current market price for those resources. And then also thinking about the acquisition valuation methodology. Matthew also mentioned this. We're averaging reproduction cost new less depreciation, and the book value, a common methodology that we believe is appropriate here. When you look at these different approaches in our base case, of course, the heat map, red identifying sort of stop sign, stop light, or economically infeasible, and green indicating feasible. That initial base case with no stranded cost applied to it for the go forward consideration, we're seeing an economic value there that's not yet feasible given the assumptions. One of the things that's key here is that go forward assumption for Black Hills rate forecast. And of course, to the extent we've modeled that, we have an assumption that's included in our upcoming report that will be provided. If you add a 10% increase to that, feasibility obviously begins to improve as Black Hills rates move higher. But what we show is that as you move that rate increase up on top of the base forecasted plan, about a 20% increase in Black Hills rates would move you to more of a break-even scenario, which is indicated in gray. And that gray would, indicate that that's a point at which feasibility could exist. Of course, on top of the other qualitative factors that the city may wish to add, in addition to the technical, operational, and financial screening that we're performing here as part of our scope at GDS. So you can see there's some sensitivity here to where those Black Hills figures are. And of course, that's obviously key as we move ahead to the economic review. On the bottom line, you also see that the base rate forecast plus a 10% increase, if we valued this at marginal cost, which simply means, you take a valuation methodology on Black Hills assets, that there might be some actual credit associated with those resources being valued at present market conditions. Again, we're in a more constrained market, so the weighted average value of those assets could in fact be believed to be at some credit, although our current assumption is at no stranded cost in the evaluation. So hopefully this gives a sense of sensitivity there, our base assumption at the top. And as you move down, you can begin to see how those variables may have an impact on the go forward costs. Again, we can't imagine to predict what Black Hills rates might be over the next coming years. But if there were larger increases anticipated, you can see how that might affect the economic screening of feasibility to give you a sense of that sensitivity as you move down this chart. Let's go to the next slide as well. Wrapping up here in summary, we see some potential next steps that the city may want to consider to review economic feasibility for municipalization. Additional utilities or adjoining regions to be included in the review. Presently, as Matthew stated, we're reviewing the city only, Pueblo City proper only, but there could be impacts from the rest of the region that may have some bearing. So that's something for consideration. Also, any adjusted assumptions for Black Hills' future retail rate forecast. If one perceived that the rate forecast in the future during this next 5 years or beyond would increase at a faster rate, that's something worthy of reconsideration in the economic screening. Finally, RFP or request for proposals to better understand available power supply from counterparties with specific pricing can be utilized to adjust our planning level assumptions. While we feel confident in the assumptions utilized for planning, very often there are suppliers that can respond to a process and did upon request in 2019, and we can see how those might impact the overall economics of providing power supply and the stranded cost approach. So those are some elements that could be factors going forward. They weren't in our current scope, but they could be a factor as we step into the future and something that the city may want to consider. Additionally, next steps could involve the renegotiation of the franchise agreement in light of the knowledge that we're providing as part of the report here. So a variety of different ways that next steps could be considered at this stage. But this is the end of our presentation summary findings this evening, and happy to answer any questions. Matthew and I can both help support those questions.
I'm going to throw one out there real quick.
I'd like to, if I could finish, I've got one more concluding statement, I guess, before we hand it back over for questions. That's okay. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Butler, Mr. Cole for the presentation, for the work on this study. As you've heard tonight, the preliminary analysis indicates that acquiring Black Hills electric utility assets within the city limits alone is not financially feasible at this time. But that said, this study also helps clarify the cost drivers, market conditions, and scale limitations that would need to change in order for this scenario to become viable. This information gives us a clearer view of our current position. It helps us evaluate other potential paths, including regional partnerships, franchise renegotiation, or other legislative advocacy that may still improve outcomes for Pueblo ratepayers. In addition to the GDS team that's online tonight, I also want to acknowledge Mark Davis with Fairfield and Woods, who's been engaged as outside counsel to advise the city on this matter. He's also attending the meeting virtually and is available along with City Attorney Carla Sykes and myself to assist in answering questions you might have. With that, we'll turn it over for questions.
I have a question. In reference to the complexity of this subject here, I'm not going to pretend I speak Japanese because some of the things that you're going over, and it's a lot to digest, and I don't know how many people here are going to be willing to admit there are councilors that have been here for a while. They've been through this process before, and I'm not going to sit here and fake anybody out that I grasped everything that was just said. So I don't know if you can bring this down a little bit and put in a little bit more plain on our language, but right now, the degree that you've given it to me anyway, and I'll admit it, is a little bit hard to swallow. Councilman Flores, sorry.
I think we need to do a little bit of housekeeping here first, and that is, as I understand, so that the public understands that we got a 2.5 page outline or summary, but we don't have the report yet. And I have been told by email, report from this consultant is not going to be ready until 7 to 10 days into the future. I just want to confirm that again, that we will not have a complete report until 7 or 10 days out. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're still finalizing the final version of the report there. Okay. Again, the conclusions and broad findings that were presented tonight will be reiterated in the report when it comes out. We certainly wanted to be able to deliver some information about the feasibility of the options presented going forward tonight.
I do have several questions, but I also want to put this in the right context. We're talking about a potential ballot issue on May the 6th. That is exactly a month away. And if we don't have this consulting report until, say, 10 days from today, that's the 16th, we literally, there's an educational component in all of this. I guess it is the, I guess, are we moving forward to just give the community a conclusion to this report with only 20 days remaining when we get the final report to election? I just think that's really a short timeline, but I want you to think about that question.
Of course. So as council's aware, this study started in January in earnest. And so this has been a compressed timeline to try to meet an election deadline so that the city can have this election, receive direction from voters in time for the potential August off-ramp that might be exercised by council of the franchise agreement. There's been no doubt that, you know, we've been doing a lot of work in a very short time here, 3 months of work compressed into a very small time. It's more than 3 months of work compressed into these 3 months to try to boil down a very complex topic with a number of different alternatives. And so what the GDS team has done tonight is boil one particular alternative down in great detail. But that underlying information certainly points out and highlights that there are other alternatives that are still feasible as well. So this doesn't necessarily end our investigation or look. It just focuses us in on other alternatives that may be viable for us to move forward. It also presents some other strategic options that we might be able to pursue that might help Pueblo ratepayers should there be other alternatives desired, from legislative advocacy to renegotiating a franchise agreement and other alternatives as well.
Right. Chairman, I have 4 questions, and in fairness to the rest of the council, I'm going to just ask 2 of them, and then I will wait till the very end and ask my remaining questions.
That's fine.
Just to be fair.
That's fine.
Here's my first 2 questions, and I'd like to ask our consultants this question after I reviewed the outline. In your summary, you're saying that the municipal utility is not feasible because of unfavorable power market dynamics, because of high acquisition costs, unknown future of Black Hills rates, potential for increased operational and startup risk. But if you also say in this study, this outcome does not necessarily affect the feasibility of other approaches. Which of the alternatives you are suggesting are not contingent upon these 4 issues you've identified?
Garrett, do you want to take this or do you want me to?
Yeah, feel free, Matthew.
Yeah, I'll start. I think specifically the consideration of a transaction that involves the entire Black Hills territory or a larger segment of the Black Hills territory and more than just its distribution assets could change the outcome of feasibility should that scenario be evaluated.
I'll ask my next question, and I'd be curious in coming back and understanding how we could include the other territories in which we have no jurisdiction in other than the city, the city boundaries itself. But you might be thinking about that question later. My second question is this: in your list of alternatives, you talk about regional power authority or creating an environment for a third-party buyer. How many projects the size and scale of Pueblo Utility, let alone a statewide utility, have you successfully supported in a transition from an investor-owned model to a municipal or co-op?
Well, as you might imagine, transactions like this don't happen very often. And so I can't personally say that I have participated or been involved in one that has occurred.
Yeah, I think just going a bit further on that, we have participated in a number of transactions in the customer choice environment, CCA environment, where aggregation takes place on power supply only assets. And we've seen that transition from IOUs take place maybe as many as 20 times under our direction. So we've done a significant amount of work on these types of things, but municipalization is far more rare for both power supply and distribution assets.
They answered those really short. I'm just going to ask one
That's fine.
quick last question until I come back. We have heard in your study, you're talking about other options besides using condemnation. That would mean having a willing seller. How would a city force a publicly traded company to sell their assets if not through condemnation?
I don't think we are suggesting a specific means beyond condemnation, but we're not suggesting that there's not something out there that could result in a transaction between those two parties.
But if they're unwilling to sell, I mean, is that the only other alternative is condemnation?
Ryan, do you have any means beyond condemnation?
Yeah, thank you, council member. Ryan Barron, I'm with the law firm Best Best and Krieger. We're a sub-consultant to GDS Associates and worked on your first study. I believe you're correct. The only legal mechanism would be to compel the sale through condemnation of those assets. There wouldn't be any other way to compel that legally other than, you know, the willingness of the parties to sort of bilaterally negotiate a sale.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, anybody else? Council Maestri?
The summarization that we got today, from Mr. Hayes, is different than what we saw on the screen. Who generated this summary? Was that you or was that GDS?
It was jointly reviewed. What is the specific difference you're referring to?
Well, they're two different. Why didn't we just have a copy of what they had? And this is different.
The slides were finalized this afternoon. This was prepared in advance of that.
This was.
Correct.
When did, to GDS, when did you realize that this was not going to be feasible?
I believe our assessment, we were planning all along for mid-April. The request was for us to come to council this evening and prepare some of these results sooner. I think it was earlier, maybe a week ago, when we were getting to the point in the analysis where we began to, start to see this internally. We began throughout the week, this past week, preparing some charts and information to be able to demonstrate that, and had conversations with our contact members at the staff as that information was coming together. So I think council's received this information with pretty timely responsiveness from the point that we were seeing this and reaching the final conclusions to giving this to you all.
Yeah, because we just received the first thing today.
Yes, that's understood. I think for us in general, it was difficult to be ready for this presentation this evening. We were working diligently to that end, but understandable that you're just seeing those thoughts and collecting your own opinions and views.
And so the fee that we paid for this study really only covers up until your findings as of now, correct? Like anything that we pursue, there would be additional fees in order to come to those conclusions, correct?
Yes, that's true. Our report is what we're driving towards to be conclusive regarding the city of Pueblo and feasibility for economic municipalization in that region. Anything that was pursued beyond that as a result of the study here would be sort of next steps in terms of implementation or other reviews.
Yeah, I was, when your opening slide, when you, were saying that the scope of work was for the municipalization, piece, of this study. And then, we go back to the Board of County Commissioners meeting where, the mayor had said that, we didn't have intentions of leaving everyone else out. So I was kind of surprised that this was the conclusion of the study, because, we have to see, I thought we had put that past us in previous conversations in the town halls, at the BOCC meeting, that we're not just thinking about municipalization, but yet that's the only conclusion we have in front of us today. We don't have any conclusions of, what it's going to take beyond this. So I was just a little surprised not to see more into looking into the other options that you're putting here as potential options.
I think we
And-
have one firm conclusion, and that is that the municipal only option is not feasible given the current constraints, rates, costs, and other factors. But
Well,
I think that they have also pointed out very clearly that at the size and scale of what we are looking at with this municipal only option, there are prospective other opportunities that may come to pass with a larger scale acquisition or a system-wide acquisition. But we all acknowledge that there needs to be other coordination with other jurisdictions to make that determination before we take a step like that. So it's going to require some additional homework, some additional study. And it's important that when we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar asset, that we're ready to stand up and take it seriously and do the homework that's needed.
At a cost.
At a cost.
At a cost. So I think I'm just wanting to make everyone aware of that, because right now between the election and this and the attorney fees, we're probably about $500,000 into this finding here today. So, but if the study's
I want to give a sense of scale again. $500,000
Mhm.
as a percentage of the acquisition of a multi-billion-dollar asset is less than 0.01%.
Correct.
It's tiny in fraction to
Yeah.
this. It is a
You know,
significant
we're
amount.
the-
I
we're the
understand.
ones, Mr. Hayes, and I'm glad that you are explaining yourself, because we're the ones that get the calls and say, you're going to ask us for this tax and that tax, you're buying a building and you're spending money on feasibility studies. So I'm glad that I'm asking the questions that I receive from my constituents. And so it's up to them whether they are happy with your answer or not. So, okay.
I'd like to give the answer, I guess, just to make sure that the entire situation is clear.
So my question is if we do only the areas around us who have a franchise free fee agreement, are some do and some don't.
That's correct.
So if we try to do the whole division collectively, what happens with those legally that don't have a franchise agreement? Do they have the opportunity to even off ramp or change? Number one. Number two, we will probably have to pursue condemnation if the utility doesn't want to sell, if Black Hills Energy doesn't want to sell. And if it's not economically feasible, and yet we are the largest piece of the pie. We have close to 80,000 ratepayers, and they're just little pieces. Are they going to be able to sustain the cost to go through the condemnation process? And how will that's really important, right? Because if they're saying it's not economically feasible for us to pursue it, how is it going to be economically feasible for for communities that are really small and really tiny?
Yep.
Because they just pursue condemnation, and do they have to pursue it individually, or can we collectively pursue it as a whole? Because we know that the condemnation process takes years. And it could run as, tens of millions of dollars. We know that.
Right. I
So-
think that there are a number of strategies on the table. And to your question about the franchise agreements in other municipalities, everybody's in a different place. We didn't all sign our agreements at the same time.
Correct.
So communities like Ordway that has a franchise agreement,
Mhm.
or communities like Canyon City that do not, or in different places with respect to
Mhm.
timing on this issue.
Mhm.
And you're correct that coordination of this with multiple jurisdictions would be a challenge that would have to be looked at. And that's part of the feasibility analysis, I think, for those all for the prospective feasibility of those alternatives.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've got something you want to add. Okay.
I was just going to add that those would take cooperation agreements between the different jurisdictions. And that would be something if council, the feasibility says that the larger scale would allow it to be feasible for our community and for the community, surrounding communities and within the region. Then that would be direction from council to go forward and talk to them. And I know we have done some discussions with them already, some of the jurisdictions, but we would have to formalize those into agreements. And then we'd also have to talk about what share of the costs everybody would participate in, how those assets would be acquired. And so that's something that we're going to have to investigate as we go forward, if that's the option that city council chooses
Mhm.
ultimately.
I guess what would be a good start is for council to know who has franchise agreements, when they're due to off-ramp, and, how many are, and what is the rights of the communities that don't have a franchise agreement? Are they able to just make this decision? And we just need to know what that's going to be.
So Mark Davidson, who's our outside counsel, can jump in, but I think the franchise agreement, if those communities that don't have a franchise agreement would be able to partner with us and form a cooperative utility. But we still have to deal with the certificate. So Black Hills has their certificate that for the ability to provide utilities for this service area. And that certificate is as good for Canyon City as it is for Pueblo. So we would still have to go through the PUC and through a PUC process, not only to identify which assets can be condemned and the value, talk about value of those assets. And then we'd have to go through the condemnation process for those assets. The second part of this is the certificate through the PUC, which is also a process through the PUC. So that would be something that we'd want to investigate and talk about ahead of time before we went through the condemnation process, or maybe at the same time, because there are two parts of the puzzle.
In the condemnation process, can it start as soon as we off-ramp, or do we have to wait till 2030?
So that was a question. I believe that if we decided to off-ramp, we could go ahead and start the PUC process. We'd have to go through the PUC process. So if we decided to take the off-ramp in August, we would start that process through the PUC to identify those assets. And then we would also have to talk about the certificate. So I'm not sure if that would be one case with the PUC or two separate cases. I'm guessing they'd be two separate cases. And then once we got a decision from the PUC, then we would move into district court for the actual condemnation process.
And it is, where is it adjudicated? Is it in district court? It's not in state court with,
So it's in state district court.
Mhm.
Yes. So it'd be in state court.
Okay, and,
Should I clarify that condemnation would be in the state district court. PUC is its
yeah,
own.
I just would like some clarification too, if it starts right after we, off-ramp. If that process starts right after we off-ramp, because depending on what the other cities surrounding us, when they do that, so I guess we'll see if there's any other questions, sorry.
Anybody got anything else? President?
I think it's important to clarify whether the community if the community takes the off-ramp, nothing gets started. until city council decides to get something started. All the off-ramp does is says that we're no longer under the franchise agreement and we have all the time we want to make a decision that may be best for us and the surrounding communities. So I just want to make that clear, right?
Just it could start once we take the off ramp, but it's going to be at the discretion of city council in your direction, correct?
Council Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hear you, Mr. Hayes, that this is a lot of work jammed within 3 months. So I appreciate the quick turnaround for this. One of the things that kind of piqued my interest that I didn't give any thought to before was how often or when is the next time that Black Hills can go back to the PUC and ask for an additional rate increase?
So I don't have a definite answer for that. Mark, do you have an answer for that when Black Hills could go back and ask for another rate increase?
Yes, Carla, Mark Davidson from the law firm Fairfield and Woods. So as I think the council is aware, Black Hills' current electric rate case is winding down, I'll say. The Public Utilities Commission has issued an initial decision about that request by Black Hills. They originally sought to increase their revenues by about $34 million. That's ultimately been cut down roughly in half. And the Public Utilities Commission initially, in their decision on the rate case, authorized the 10.13% rate increase for all rate classes. And rate classes in this context are residential customers, small commercial, large commercial, industrial, et cetera. So that decision by the Public Utilities Commission has now been subjected to at least 2 appeals, one by Black Hills and one by the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate. Those were both filed late today in conformance with the time frame for filing what's called an application for rehearing, re-argument, or reconsideration. So the commission and their advisory staff will review those arguments set forth in these appeals. I'll call them appeals for that purpose, and then have another meeting to discuss what the outcome of the applications for rehearing, re-argument, or reconsideration should be. So the point here is that once that rate case is fully concluded and final rates are put into effect, there needs to be some time period between which those rates become effective and when Black Hills can file its next electric rate increase. The reason is that the impact of the change in rates needs to be understood by not only Black Hills, but by the commission, Utility Consumer Advocate, and customers, so that everyone will understand what the impact of the rate change has been. If Black Hills, a week after they get their final decision, says, we need more money still, we're going to file another rate case, that's something called pancaking in the rate making area. And it's I'll say, frowned upon by regulatory agencies for utilities to come forward with rate cases sequentially very close to each other. So, for instance, Public Service Company of Colorado has kind of come into a cadence of seeking rate relief for either their gas or electric business kind of every other year, so every 2 years. That's a possibility for Black Hills, I would say. They were 8 years between their last rate case and this one. They say that's one of the reasons why their requested relief was so large. So that's a long answer for a simple question, but that's the background and the theory behind when the next rate case could be filed.
No, that gives me a better perspective in terms of, Black Hills just can't go back to PUC, in July and I guess submit another additional rate increase.
I would say they could if there are some extraordinary circumstance for a particular reason, but in general, it would be frowned upon by the Public Utilities Commission for them to come back so quickly. Yes.
Okay. And then, so I did hear from, you know, I guess this summary that municipalization for the city of Pueblo is not feasible at this time, according to this report. But that's specific to municipalization. Walk me through the other scenarios that potentially are feasible.
Sure. So there are several that are under consideration, right? There are various flavors and types and slices and dices of different scenarios too that could be put together for a viable scenario. But let me talk broadly about them. So one of the potential scenarios again involves the city of Pueblo cooperating with other governmental entities to create a public utility or cooperative utility that can serve broader areas than just the city of Pueblo, potentially the entire service area. Another potential alternative might be engaging existing utilities or co-ops that might be interested in operating or serving citizens in this area. So those are, again, they can range in scale from local to larger acquisitions. And then you've got the potential for, again, outside third-party buyers potentially. And so the city can create an environment where that's incentivized by not renewing a franchise agreement potentially, I guess it depends kind of on what the city desires to do going forward. But the idea that the city-only municipalization option being not feasible suggests that there's the same argument to be made for the other cases is a little premature. So I think it warrants further study, and we need to look at the size and scale of a larger acquisition to see if there are economies of scale or other efficiencies that might come out to make those options viable as well. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of different options, including establishing our own co-op, utilizing a different co-op or energy provider. I guess, so within the ballot language that we currently have, 2A for the special election, nowhere in there does it say municipalization.
That's correct.
What does it say?
It says, should the city of Pueblo, you might get a few little small words wrong, but should the city of Pueblo acquire the transmission, generation, and distribution assets of Black Hills Energy Colorado LLC, if determined feasible, and terminate the franchise agreement if determined feasible. I think I got that right.
Yeah. How does then this study impact, or does it, the ballot question itself?
In my mind, it does not. Sorry. In my mind, it does not. There are still potentially viable alternatives out there that could be better for Pueblo ratepayers. And again, the ballot question really opens up and signals to council members and elected officials voters' intent or preferences with respect to should we continue to look at these viable alternatives going forward. Yeah.
Well said. Great. Because 2A doesn't have anything to do with municipalization. I guess what I'm seeing this too is, I've seen all of the many ads that are all about municipalization, and then the, Boulder did it, and using a lot of like weaponizing municipalization piece, even though the ballot measure itself doesn't talk about municipalization. So I want to be clear that the ballot measure that we're asking 2A is not about is it feasible to municipalize? It's like essentially, can the city look at alternative energy sources or transmissions other than Black Hills and terminate the franchise agreement with Black Hills?
I believe that any of those options are on the table. So that's exactly what we want to do, is not automatically forego looking at any particular option that might be viable. And once options are determined based on current conditions not to be viable, we don't need to pursue any more resources, looking into those. We can focus in more on the specifics of alternatives that look like they may have more viable tendencies, if you will.
Council.
Sorry, I have one more question, Mr. Chair. My last question then is around the the franchise. So in May, we're asking, is it feasible? Later on, then we'll have to do, if that, depending on that direction, we'll have to go back to the voters and ask for the off ramp. Is that correct? No, council determines that.
No, so the ballot question in May is should city council take the off-ramp if it's deemed feasible? So voters are essentially giving you the direction that if you determine that it's feasible, they want you to take the off-ramp, yes
Okay.
or no, or not take the off-ramp, depending on how they vote. So once this goes to the voters are saying, yes, take the off-ramp, don't take the off-ramp. But it's going to be up to city council to determine whether or not that's feasible. So just because they vote for it, if city council then gets more information, determines it is not feasible to do any of these options, then city council is not bound, doesn't have to take that off ramp. It's still going to be at city council's discretion whether or not it's feasible. And of course, we'll have public meetings before then and people can come and speak as well. But so it'll be done through ordinance and not through another vote.
Otherwise, we're back at the negotiating table with Black Hills in this fall.
Well, we wouldn't be back at the negotiating table this fall. The actual franchise agreement expires in 2030. So if we don't take the off-ramp in 25, the off-ramp just allows us to get out of the franchise agreement early.
Okay.
Okay. So the franchise agreement terminates naturally by its terms in 2030. So if council decides not to take the off-ramp in 2025 in August, council still has to decide what they want to do over the next 5 years as we near the end of the franchise agreement in 2030. So everything that you're looking at now can also help guide you in that path and what you're going to do. So even if the voters say no for August, or even if you decide that it's not feasible for this August to take the off-ramp, city council is still going to have to decide what it's going to look like in 2030 and what are the options or what do you want to do in 2030.
Yeah, I appreciate that because something else that, I've seen and heard that I think is misinformation is that this is going to impact us right away. When in actuality, this is very much like strategic planning, right? Like we're looking, 5 years down the road and then, doing things right now that are going to impact us 5 years down the road, not necessarily, next year we're going to have increased costs because we're off ramped or whatever that looks like. So I appreciate that explanation, Carla.
And the other thing that I just want to clarify too is that if the voters say yes and city council deems that it's feasible and ultimately decides to take the off ramp in August, that doesn't mean that all utilities from Black Hills cease. Black Hills is still obligated to provide electric utilities for the citizens of Pueblo until another operator is established and identified. So they're going to remain and they're still obligated to pay a fee to the city for the use of our streets and our right-of-ways, and that would be equal to the franchise agreement fee. So it's still going to be 3%. So the city is going to still receive money for that. So we're not going to lose what we've talked about before. We're not going to lose the franchise fee. It just won't be a franchise fee anymore, but it's still a fee for the use of our roads and highways and right-of-ways.
Council Flores.
The timeline really has me concerned. I mean, when you think about some of these options of trying to gather all this information from all of these other communities and coming up with some sort of a co-op by sometime in August, I don't see that happening. When I look at the other options here of pursuing acquisition, I mean, that could take years. So when the citizens vote on May the 6th, they're basically giving their vote to the city, the 7 of us, as to what we're going to do in August, because there's no other election. And they'll just have to trust us that we're going to make the right decision prior to the deadline on August 20th, or whatever the deadline is to put it on the ballot in November. So I'm concerned about that. And, but I have a couple of other questions to our consultants. And one of them has to do with, does the city, if we were by somehow, some miracle, taking the utility over, do we have any burden of proof to demonstrate to the PUC that we can provide that power to the citizens? How is the PUC integrated into that decision?
It may be Mark Davidson that wants to chime in
Yeah,
on that.
Councilman, let me take that one. So the answer, as with many things, is it depends. If, to your point, there were an unanticipated outcome that the city only acquired the assets of Black Hills within the city limits and established a truly municipal utility, then the Public Utilities Commission does not have jurisdiction over the rates and services provided by a municipal utility within its four corners. Once the municipal utility begins to provide service outside its city limits, like for instance, Colorado Springs does, they have a variety of certificates of public convenience and necessity enabling Colorado Springs utility to provide electric service to customers outside the city limits. Another option. Another alternative, as has been discussed earlier this evening, is the potential acquisition of the entire Black Hills energy system. And then when you are providing service, again, beyond the city limits, the Public Utilities Commission does have jurisdiction over your rates and service to make sure that customers outside the city limits are not treated differently from a rate standpoint and service standpoint than customers within the city limits. So it's a fairness equity issue, and it's a utility obligation to provide service to similarly situated customers in their individual classes. I hope that helps.
So if I could chime in on that too, Mark, if in order to get, go to the PUC and obtain the certificate from Black Hills, there's a standard that the city would have to meet. Is that right?
Yes,
And
yes.
what is that standard?
So it's a standard of a lack of an inability or unwillingness to provide adequate service at just and reasonable rates, essentially. And so it's a burden of proof that the city would have in order to demonstrate that the certificate of public convenience and necessity held by Black Hills is not being adequately met, the requirements of that certificate.
And that would be something that we'd have to do if we were going to look at providing service outside of our municipal boundaries.
Correct, yes. Not within the city limits, but outside, yes.
To the consultants, this question is to you. Have you guys calculated or trying to calculate what the upfront costs would be that the city would need to fund in order to get assuming that we got to the point that we were going to run this, what kind of funds would we need to start this engine up at the very beginning when we take it over?
Yeah, we certainly have, and of course the acquisition of the assets, the building credit for power supply acquisition, startup cost, all of those things have been contemplated in our assessment, and that's in the magnitude of hundreds of millions of dollars upfront to effectuate the municipalization.
And as I understand, the assets alone could be close to $1 billion. Am I off on that? Or could that be correct?
It depends on the scenario that we're talking about here. In the case of the city only boundary distribution system, it would be a good bit less than that.
And then my last question is this, when we get your final report on 10 days from now or 7 days from now, what can we expect? Is there conclusions that you're still trying to make? Or can we get some conclusions when we get the final report?
Well, I think we're sharing we did our best to share conclusions tonight, which include for the city only territory, the economic screening looks infeasible at the outset here without considerations of larger territories. You'll see that conclusion reflected in our report as well. So those two will be.
Basically the report's just going to say how you got to these conclusions that we have in front of us.
Correct. And hopefully there'll be an appreciation for the robust nature of the details and models that are utilized to get to this summary level review tonight. I know this is a brief segment to review that, but the report will certainly entail the broader pieces of detail that get us to that place.
Thank you.
Council Maestri.
Before we jump, can I respond one more piece? You'd mentioned timeline specifically, so I want to clarify that there are two decisions to be made between now and August. One is by the voters in May to determine yes or no whether to vote. And the second is for council to determine whether or not to exercise the off-ramp for the franchise agreement. There is no coalition or utility that will be formed between now and August. I just want to make that clear. Black Hills will continue to be the utility provider during that time, but the city will need time and space to investigate these alternatives and potentially bring this coalition together to discuss these alternatives where there's mutual interest. So I just want to point that out.
And the decision by the city council in August is really based on this information we're looking at now.
I think we've got also between now and then, you also have time to get more information and collect more data and draw better conclusions or more refined conclusions as well. Again, we're bringing you what we have in these first 3 months of study, but there are still 4 more months to go between now and August. So there's quite a bit of time still here to continue to refine these conclusions and bring more information forward.
Council Maestri, please.
It's kind of too bad. I think we failed the community. We told them that we would bring them a feasibility study that would conclude what council, what we said was that the city of Pueblo was going to try to do a takeover on Black Hills Energy, because that's what we've said all along up until the Board of County Commissioners meeting. Then that changed to offer the citizens lower rates. And we would know that in that feasibility study today, which we still don't have the final, but what we've been told is that we don't, it's not feasible. It never says whether they can lower the rates or not. That's what the community is interested in. They're interested in lowering rates. And in all of these options that you've offered here, that is in our next step, you're still not, there's nothing in here, and they're not deemed as feasible options because they're just options right now. They still have to go through the study. They're not talking about lowering any of the rates. That's what the people want to know. That's the simple math of it. They don't want to know what could, what could be a possibility to make their decision in this vote. They want to know if we have a solution that's going to offer them lower rates. And the municipalization ads that are going around, yes, because that's all we've talked about. Like I said, until we got to the Board of County Commissioners meeting, I didn't realize that we were going to start out inviting everyone else in, but we didn't bring that information here today. So I understood that when I got to a town hall that there was a second study coming into play because They weren't going to have the answers. So again, are we supposed to do a resolution to say yes on this? And yet we're not very credible at this point, because what we told the people of this community was that we were going to get them lower rates and we would have that feasibility study today.
The premise of your statement's a little bit misleading. So at the beginning of the RFP, we wrote 2 phases of work. One was a base option to conduct a preliminary feasibility study looking into municipalization. There was a second phase added into that scope that was an option that the city could exercise should it choose to move forward with continuing the study. There's no, we need more. There was no presumption that we were going to have to do another study or that we were going to be wasteful of taxpayers' dollars or anything else. This is a due diligence look. It's responsible, transparent due diligence, bringing forward the information that people need to make a decision. The concern I have is when we decide to not look into these issues and not plan ahead. If we're going to move forward, we need to do this with eyes wide open and with transparent and unbiased factual information coming forth. Right now, we have 2 feasibility studies, both drawing a similar conclusion about the feasibility of the municipal only option. That is all. The other options that we have discussed tonight, the alternatives that are there, still need to be looked at. And for us to turn our heads away now is for us to ignore potentially better options for the city for the future. I just want to make that clear that that's what we're doing, and that's what this election is about, is giving the city options to continue to look.
Well, Mr. Hayes, don't you think rather than off-ramping, because at 2030, we don't have to off-ramp, we don't have to take the off-ramp, but we could take the next few years to see if these communities want to buy in, to see if all of these things can take place without taking the off-ramp and losing the revenue. Because even though, Ms. Sykes, you have mentioned that we're still getting road fees and so forth, we're still getting those on top of the franchise fee right now. We're
No.
not?
No,
Not
that is
correct.
the franchise fee.
That is the franchise.
That's what
fee.
makes up the
So it's going to
franchise fee.
turn back into those types of fees to Black Hills Energy because there isn't a franchise fee in place.
They will have to pay us the same amount that they pay us as a franchise fee for the use of our roads.
Mhm.
So it will be the same amount. It will be the same fee. They can still bill it back to the customers. It'll still come to us, but it won't be technically called a franchise fee because we don't have a franchise. But the payment of that money is not going to change. It's still going to be there. It's still going to be the same amount.
Currently, Black Hills does not pay permit fees under our current ordinances. So Board of Waterworks, Excel, and Black Hills do not pay excavation permit fees to the city for work in the right of way. Those are provisions that are included in our franchise agreement, but they make that up through this franchise fee. So those are considerations there.
Mhm. And so what's the cost of the next step?
So if it depends on the options that we want to go look at and how deep we go. I think we can bring some of that information forward. I think that there will be a point in time here where City Council will probably need some more specific details about those prospective options. We want to bring that forward to you in a way that you can make a decision that does not impact the city's negotiating position with future negotiations. But that'll be an important point to bring forward at that time when that information is ready. But I think that here in between now and August, there will be opportunities to better refine some of these alternatives and bring that information forward so we can make a good decision about the off-ramp or not.
So you have there's been no talks of how much it's going to cost.
We have a preliminary feasibility study that costs $300,000,
Mhm.
and there are I do not recall off the top of my head if that was already priced or not, but I think that there was some pricing already provided as well for those other options. So we could look that up, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the community should know what the total cost of this is going to be moving forward to find out the other options.
We can bring that forward.
Mhm.
So if I could just make one comment, we've talked about the time that it's going to take to set this up. So there was never an idea that as soon as, if we did take the off-ramp in August, all of a sudden we were going to have a municipal utility or a utility other than Black Hills within weeks or months. There is going to take time to set it up and to make sure that it's done correctly. We have to go through the PUC. We have to go through some legal hurdles to get there if that's what is decided. However, if we do take the off-ramp in August, that means that could happen anytime between now and whenever it happens. It could happen prior to 2030. If you don't take the off-ramp, then it will not happen until sometime after 2030. So there's been some sensitivity to the rates and going back for more rates. And I know council has heard a lot of complaints from community members about the high utility rates we pay here. There's not going to be any relief prior to 2030 if the off-ramp is not taken. With the off-ramp just allows us the option, once we do get it set up, we could get it potentially set up prior to 2030. Hopefully, if not, it would be soon after 2030. Instead, if you wait till then and you do the regular termination, it's not going to happen until 5 years or more after that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's got to be a stand-up period.
Well, yeah, there is going to be quite a bit of a stand-up period until we win in condemnation court and everybody else does, because depending on when their franchise fee expires, they may not be pulling the trigger the same time we are. And it's, this could take years, and then we would we all have to win in condemnation court in order for this to happen?
So Mark can correct me if I'm incorrect in this, but the way that I would envision it happening at those communities that are going to come together, that can come together at the time, would come together as one. We would have to decide who or which community or what organization, what we're going to form to own those assets. And it's that entity that would participate, be part of that condemnation. So there's a lot of pieces that need to be put together, and so that's something that we need to look at. So the city could own all of that and have others contribute to that. So the city might do it all on their own. The city could have others participate. So what that looks like is going to be determined by those cooperation agreements as we go forward.
And then just what you said about the road fee and so forth, because other things were said as soon as if the franchise fee goes away, well, that's fine because that gives you a savings right away. But actually the ratepayers are going to be paying that in a road fee because they're going to be charging it back to us. They're going to be allowed to charge that back to us, correct?
They can, unless the city chooses to forego its fee.
Mm-hmm.
So the city could at this point choose to forego the franchise fee as well.
So then we wouldn't have we would be
So the
totally
city-
losing the 3.5 million.
The city would not have the 3.5 million, and
Mhm.
rates, and the citizens then would recognize that savings in their bills.
Okay. All righty.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions, going to be all over the board, of course. In reference to how does the things that we're doing here impact the county residents in reference to what we decide at the Pueblo level? How does that work?
I'll start. She can correct me if I'm wrong. Essentially, with the municipalization option, right? If you take 48,000 ratepayers out of the city of Pueblo and divide, there are costs that will be transferred to us, right? Essentially, rates are determined based on costs to operate your system and divide that by a number of ratepayers that are out there. That's a very simplistic look at it. If we cut a large chunk of the city out by itself, prospectively, the county would also be in a worse position. So that's a consideration for us, right? That's a political policy and other consideration that needs to be made too. In terms of, again, this is where the larger acquisition, a system-wide acquisition, those economies of scale, those efficiencies that are gained by looking at a larger system and not dividing the system up might be more viable. I hope that answers your question.
Have we had any conversations with the county?
We did have a conversation with the county Board of County Commissioners a few weeks ago, just kind of addressing that particular concern. They had raised the concerns about the city, essentially extracting itself from the Black Hills service area, establishing a municipal utility and what its impacts might be. And at that time, we also told them that we are looking at these other alternatives that are going to be a broader look at other full system acquisitions or other alternatives that would be different than that outcome.
I had a call from a person that read the entire franchise agreement, and I want to make sure this is accurate. What they told me was that the ratepayers of Pueblo are not responsible to pick up the fee for those struggling to pay electric bills, and that should be the company's obligation. Are you familiar with that?
Not explicitly, but Carl, go ahead.
I'm not specifically familiar with that provision.
I do know that in our bills, there are, there's a, on my bill personally at home, I've got a $1 charge every month that goes into a fund to help provide for folks that can't get their bills paid, I guess. So Black Hills administers that program. I don't know what the qualifications are, but as a ratepayer, I know that I'm paying $1 into that account every month. But I don't know if Black Hills also contributes on top of that. That's a question that we would need to ask them specifically on how their program is funded and what that benefits.
So I couldn't speak to that specific provision at this time, but I could review it for you.
Let me just go backwards a little bit. In reference to the 48% that Black Hills was charging us and supposedly at the same rate as other stranded communities around, whatever that is, or 18% on top of what they wanted this last ask, that to me doesn't say that's much of a good corporate partner for Pueblo. And I've always been suspicious of that. And I don't know how long that went on for, but if the franchise fee is knocked down another, 3%, and we've got it down to 7% now, I believe, is the rate. At 7% would knock it down to 4%, right? Is that right?
The franchise fee right now is 3%.
3%. But if we don't have to pay the franchise fee, would that come off the bill of the customers?
Potentially, yes.
So that would go down to 4%. Okay, that's what I need to know. One more thing. Out of Minnesota, they just did an article where, believe it or not, coal-powered plants are being looked at for generation of power for these enormous data centers that we probably need here in Pueblo. So don't count out 5 and 6 quite yet, but just wanted to throw that out. Councilman Flores.
I don't have a question. I think we need to end it here because we've got other items on the agenda. But if the city of Pueblo, in answer to his question about what does the county lose, I did get an email from the county assessor, and there are 22 entities that receive taxes from Black Hills Energy. And the largest entity is actually School District 70 in Pueblo County. And when you add up these 22 entities, the city's in there for $1.6 million, county's in there for 4.3, School District 70 and 60 account for about 5.5 million. Those are annual taxes that are paid. Now, this would only kick in on the day that we were the operators of the electric utility, but there would be a loss of taxes of 13 million, 65 million over the next 5 years, which has nothing to do with the franchise fee. This is simply the taxes. And I bring that up because nobody seems to include those items in there. And the reason that the taxes would go away is the city of Pueblo does not pay taxes. So our taxes would be zero. All of this would go away. I'm assuming that's why the county is so concerned about this.
Okay, Councilor Maestri.
And in reference to what Councilor Flores is saying, he's talking about municipalization, but wouldn't that also count for a co-op? Because isn't a co-op a nonprofit? Would they be entitled not to pay taxes? So like a co-op or the city owning the utility, that revenue would be lost?
I don't know the specific answer to that question. I don't know if Mark may have something to say, Carla.
I do not have a ready answer for that question, but I can look into it. I don't know if Mark has an answer or if Mark wants to chime in and correct anything I may have misspoken about so far.
Summarize everything well. Carla, I don't know about the cooperative model and its tax liability or lack thereof. If they're a nonprofit, there wouldn't be a tax burden, I think, but I'd have to look at that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, because that,
I'm sorry.
that's concerning. You know, we're losing the money from, what is it, Comanche 1, 2, and 3. And so this would be like another loss for that. So just something else that we need to find out what the answer to is on that, because I noticed that cooperative keeps getting thrown around. And so we need to understand what the losses of that are going to be in it. So.
Okay, we're gonna have to conclude here because we're getting pretty late into the day here. Matthew Butler and Garrett Cole, and I appreciate you coming out on Zoom. And Andrew Hayes, thank you. Carla, we're gonna move on to the next subject. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Humane Society Pikes Peak Region update. Julie Justman, Vice President of Operations. Irina Van Dusen, Director of Shelter Operations, Pueblo. Lindsay Vigna, Assistant Director of Animal Law Enforcement, 15-minute presentation. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you for having us this evening. One thing we wanted to do as our first presentation to the council this year is just provide a little bit of history of how the Humane Society of the Pikes Peak region came to operate in Pueblo. And then we're going to talk about our 2024 stats because we haven't been in front of you yet to do that. And then also as far as the shelter and then also animal law enforcement. Some of you may have been around this long to remember this history. And so if you have, sorry. If you've not, back in 1999, there was an organization that took over the sheltering operation here in Pueblo called Pueblo Animal League. And they took over the shelter operation because there was dissatisfaction with the current municipal program that was providing services at that time. So the model then was the PAL program was running the shelter and the city employees were still doing animal control. And there was still dissatisfaction within the community, and the PAL program was running into trouble financially, and then also with the service level and care to the animals in the shelter over off of Stockyard Road. We began to be contacted by citizens of Pueblo in Colorado Springs about potentially taking over the program. And in 2002, the state veterinarian's office fined PAL for poor conditions and endorsed a potential RFP proposal from HSPPR. That was what occurred. The city of Pueblo and Pueblo County entered into an IGA with the Humane Society of the Pikes Peak region, and we began services doing business as Pueblo Animal Services in September of 2002 over on Stockyard Road. One of the agreements that we all had, all three entities, was that we would work together to bring a new building to the citizens of Pueblo and Pueblo County. And what came from that is a countywide initiative, a bond initiative to fund a new shelter. And that initiative passed, and the Humane Society brought to the table just over $1 million in donations to help put equipment into the building and furniture and whatnot, and then also the donation of the land on Eagle Ridge where the building is now. We moved into this building in May of 2007. And a milestone for the Humane Society of the Pikes Peak region was that the first veterinarian that our organization hired was here in Pueblo in November of 2009. And then in 2011, we began our trap, neuter, and return program, recognizing that the number of cats coming in through the facility was really excessive, and we needed to do something to help reduce the number of coming in through the shelter. In 2012, we had some rough negotiations with the city and county. And what came from that is that the county offered to take over the building maintenance and ground maintenance for the facility. So that is something that they do to this day so that we don't incur those costs. And I believe the city contributes to that whenever an item comes to over $1,000 regarding repair, like HVAC or anything attached to the building. That the county does the grounds and snow removal and things like that. In 2017, No Kill Colorado proponents were very active in this area. They targeted the Pueblo program. And in 2018, they were able to pass within the city limits the PAPA Act, which was a no-kill act. And then there was an RFP put out in 2019, which the city agreed to choose a different provider. And we ended services here in December of 2018, after 16 years of serving Pueblo. The new provider, which was part of PAWS Pueblo, called themselves Community Animal Services of Pueblo, started operating in January of 2019. And less than 90 days later, they relinquished their license to operate that facility because they could not provide adequate care. And also out of that, the veterinarian that was working for CASP as well as the shelter director were charged with cruelty to animals. We were asked to re-enter into a contract with the city and county, and we did so under a temporary situation with reduced services for 90 days while we negotiated a longer contract. We entered into a 3-year contract in 2019 in August, and then another one came 3 years later. So we've been successfully contracting since August of 2019. Just wanted to highlight too that we began a partnership with PetSmart Charities and PetSmart Corporate in March of 2022 to operate what had been a vacant band field in their PetSmart store. And we've been operating a wellness clinic there since then. And we also started spay and neuter services in that facility in November of 2023. And we also were just awarded in December of 2024, a $100,000 grant from PetSmart Charities for an incubator initial grant for the Pueblo East Side neighborhood. This first year that this grant funds is a discovery phase of finding out what that Pueblo East Side neighborhood really needs related to for their pets. Is it access to veterinary care? Are the barriers purely financial? Are they transportation? Do they need food? Just trying to find out what they need. So that's what we're in the progress of doing right now in the East Side community. And that concludes my section. And I'm gonna switch places with Lieutenant Vignette here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us tonight, City Council. My name is Erin Van Dusen. I am the Director of Shelter Operations for the Pueblo campus of the Humane Society of the Pikes Peak region. I get to celebrate 2024 with you. So I'd like to walk you through some of our key statistics that we are very, very proud of accomplishing last year. So we took in over 8,000 animals to the Pueblo location in 2024. We adopted out 2,704 animals. We have a quick breakdown by dogs, cats, and other species. We were able to transfer 2,600 animals to other partner agencies in Colorado for the purpose of rehoming. So these are animals that were pretty far beyond our capacity to care for, but our community still needed to be able to bring those animals into the shelter. So we were able to place them with other organizations, mostly in Colorado Springs, but across the state to rehome those animals. We reunited 1,500 animals with their owners. These were lost pets looking for their owners. We spayed and neutered and vaccinated over 1,300 community cats. 1,000 of them came from the community. So these are colony managers feeding cats that we were able to offer low cost or free spay neuter services for. And then we were able to spay neuter and release over 300 cats that came into the shelter that were thriving where they were. Pueblo Wellness Clinic saw some tremendous growth in 2024. So in terms of access to public spay and neuter, we were able to increase our capacity by 359%. We increased our capacity for public vaccinations, low-cost vaccinations to the Pueblo community by 12%, and Pueblo wellness appointments where you could bring your pet in to see a veterinarian by 6%. At the bottom, I also do want to highlight that the Humane Society of the Pikes Peak region spayed and neutered over 15,000 animals in 2024. So we have come up in front of, we have provided presentations to City Council several times talking about the increase in animals coming into care. And I am really proud of this number that we are so proactively addressing the pet overpopulation in our communities. And because it is April, I also wanted to give you a glimpse into 2025. So we are seeing a really big increase in our volunteer hours. So 36% over last year. So far in the first quarter of this year, we have already taken in over 1,600 animals. We've adopted out almost 700 animals. We've transferred 350. We've been able to spay and neuter over 200 community cats. And our Pueblo Wellness Clinic saw 944 public patients. So this is our community bringing in their animals for services. And we spayed and neutered 365 animals. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Lindsay Bina.
All right. So as Aaron mentioned, we have already started 2025 with a bang. It's been pretty busy thus far, but I do want to take a few minutes. I just have a couple of slides to celebrate 2024 and what that looked like for animal law enforcement here in Pueblo. So as you can see, we completed in total just shy of 16,000 total calls for service. It's a pretty high number considering our staffing levels. Over 1,600 dangerous animal responses. So again, those are including any time an animal is out and acting or showing some type of threatening behavior. Just under 600 injured animal calls. 16 public events, which is something I'm really proud to share. Actually, out of all of our jurisdictions that HSPPR serves, our Pueblo team and ALE attended the most public events in 2024. 262 court appearances. So a good chunk of those were in municipal court, but that does include court appearances in county and district court as well. 3,200 responses to cruelty investigations. So whether those are initial responses, looking into an animal's welfare, or follow-ups and things like that. And then 353 proactive patrols. So those are calls where an officer is recognizing that, maybe there's some neighborhoods that we tend to get a lot more calls on. And so they're just taking a more proactive approach and having a presence in those neighborhoods. And then the last slide I had, I just wanted to, like I mentioned, give the Pueblo team here extra kudos for all the events they participated in. We were asked again to be judges for the Chihuahua Parade at the Chili and Frijoles Festival, which is always a really fun event. The Dr. Seuss Read Across America in 2024, that was at Goodnight Elementary School. And it was an opportunity, that picture at the bottom there is our officers getting a chance to read some Dr. Seuss to the kiddos. The East Side Cleanup event, that was actually put on in 2024 through the Leadership Pueblo program, that we had an officer actually in that group. And so we were able to be a part of those efforts. And then last but certainly not least, the Pueblo Parade of Lights float that our Pueblo team put together. And this was the second year in a row they won #1 for best float involving animals. So something that they were very proud of. And I believe that is all we had. So we can answer any questions you all might have.
Council, any questions? I think we're good. Appreciate the presentation, you guys. Thank you very much. Next up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Next up is Bringing Power Home, Black Hills Off-Ramp and Franchise Agreement, Diane Dante. Bringing Power Home, Ken Dante, Bringing Power Home, a 15-minute presentation. Thank you guys for coming. Put your mic on. There you go.
Okay, Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity to present today. So I'm going to be reading from here. There's going to be some repetition between the previous GSA feasibility study and what I'm going to present. I created this in respect to the whole territory, not just the city of Pueblo. So let's begin. How do I click this? Oh. So the things we're going to talk about is the introduction, terminate void franchise agreement, the actual franchise agreement, residents buy-in, summary, and questions. So I'm giving you some definitions of what's in the presentation. Company means the Black Hills Energy, BHE means Black Hills Energy. BPH 2020 was Bring Power Home 2020. Off-ramp means terminate franchise agreement. VP Vice President, PAGS Pueblo Airport Generation Station. Introduction. Bring Power Home members would like to give you information on the franchise agreement and the 2025 off-ramp. Bring Power Home is a grassroots issue campaign to help terminate Black Hills franchise agreement. For those that don't know what Bring Power Home is, the city is able to take the off-ramp without municipalization per a vote, and it would be the simplest and easiest and first step with departing from Black Hills Energy. The city is able to keep the franchise fee, and Black Hills Energy cannot legally turn off electricity until there is an alternate provider. The city will not pay the debt from their general funds. It will be paid by the utility using the revenue from electric bill payers. Sorry. So I talked to Joe Pereira and he's from Dora, and he said, my understanding is that if you take the off-ramp, you would not be required to take any steps at all. All it means is that Pueblo is not participating in the franchise. You can study your options. Basically, what he's saying is you don't have to condemn. You can just take the off-ramp and do nothing else. Here's a campaign analysis of the BPH 2020. The Bring Power Home 2020 campaign failed. We have analyzed the reasons. We had 3 counselors opposed to it that were advertising for Black Hills. We were campaigning during COVID-19, making canvassing impossible. Bring Power Home 2020 budget was $50,000 and Black Hills budget was over $2 million. Continuation of utility service in the franchise agreement, Article 4.1B and 16. In the event this franchise is not renewed at the expiration of its term or is terminated for any reason, and the city is not provided for an alternative utility service, the company shall have no right to discontinue service or to remove any company facilities, and the city shall have no right to require the removal of company facilities. Supply of electricity, Article 6.2 in the franchise agreement. The company shall take all reasonable and necessary steps to assure an adequate supply of electricity to the city and its residents at just and reasonable rates. Franchise fee, Article 4.1. The company shall collect from its customers and shall pay to the city a sum equal to 3% of all gross revenue. Continuation of service, Article 16. The company shall be entitled to collect from residents and shall be obligated to pay the city at the same times and in the same manner as provided in the franchise, an aggregate amount equal to the amount which the company would have paid as a franchise fee as consideration for the use of the city's streets, which is repetitive of what was spoke of earlier. Canyon City's franchise fee. Canyon City's franchise agreement expired in 2017. The city did not take an off-ramp. In November 2020, the residents of Canyon City voted not to renew their franchise. The city requested Black Hills to cancel their franchise fee in order to give the residents lower bills. Black Hills wanted to put a renewal on the ballot a couple years later, but Canyon City said no. Franchise agreement term, Article 2.3. Term of the franchise granted by this ordinance 8186 shall be for 20 years. This franchise shall take effect at 12 a.m. on August 12, 2010, and should terminate at 11:59:99 p.m. on August 12, 2030, unless extended by mutual consent. And that is not a typo by me. That's directly out of the franchise agreement. Municipal rights to purchase are condemned. Article 12A. The right and the privilege of the city to purchase or condemn any company facilities located within the territorial boundaries of the city and the company's right in connection therewith as set forth in applicable provision of the Constitution and statutes of the state of Colorado. Colorado State Statute 31-15-7074. Nothing in this paragraph shall authorize the condemnation or purchase of any such works or systems within 20 years after the granting of any franchise, therefore, except for periods 10 or 15 years thereafter, without the consent of the owner of the franchise. The deadline for Pueblo to take the operate is August 12th, 2025. So future electric utility. What are the options for the future utility? We could create a not-for-profit municipal or cooperative, create an enterprise to operate a utility, contract with the existing utility to operate. Have another utility purchase BHE, prefer a not-for-profit utility, take over ownership. How will the debt for the utility be paid? The debt for the utility will be paid by the residents' bills the same way that we pay for Black Hills Energy expensive debt. It will not be paid from city funds. It will not bankrupt the city. How will the residents save money on their bills? Black Hills rates pay for the maintenance and operation of the grid. The rates also pay for the following items, which include compensation and stock dividends. Black Hills Energy requested 10.5% return on their investments. Board of Directors received $200,000, $300,000 per year. President and Chief Executive Officer receives $5,639,000 per year. VP and Chief Officer receives $1,589,000 per year. Compliance Officer, $1,673,000 per year. Chief Information Officer, $1,067,000 per year. VP of Utilities, $1,098,000 per year. All legal and employees benefits, etc., approved by the PUC. So the total is $9,593,000 per year, including compensation stocks. These salary packages will increase each year. If we terminate the franchise agreement, the utility will not be paying out these outrageous salary packages. Opposition. The reason municipalization has not been successful is because of political will. The Edison Electric Institute, IOU trade group, has a playbook to fight municipalization. Case study, Winter Park, Florida. From the former city commissioner, Barbara DeVane, it was the best thing that the city has ever done. I'm glad we took it on, plus it's making money. Initially, DeVane was opposed to the breakaway. Involvement of the residents. The residents of Pueblo need to have a say in what their utility will look like. The city is now conducting town halls for the benefit of the residents. Presentations and council's work sessions from different utilities will be beneficial for the residents in the future. And Bring Power Home Pueblo can help. Rate increases over the year. Since the signing of the franchise agreement, there have been several rate increases. Rates increased in 2009, requested $40.2 million due to new power plants, PAGs, and infrastructure. 2013 requested $14.2 million, received $3.1 billion, increase from PUC. 2016 requested $8.5 million, received $1 million, increase from PUC. 2024 requested $36 billion, revised to $25 million, received $17 million, increase from PUC. The reason why there were 8 years between 2016 and 2024 was because in 2020, we were campaigning to off ramp from them. So they didn't raise the rates because of that. And then they made an agreement with the city to not raise the rates for 5 years. So as soon as that 5 years was up, they raised the rates. Total BHE requested was $98.9 million, and approximate total approved from the PUC was $61.3 million. PHE will request increases in the future, with the PUC being required to approve. And this is CAMI rates over time. And as you can see, it goes up, it comes down a little bit, and then it zooms way up. And this is on the original rate request.
The top line is the Black Hills electric line compared to all the other utilities in the Front Range. So we can see that we're paying the highest rates in the state.
Summary, Black Hills Energy has the authority to make decisions with the approval of the PUC, treating the city as their financial institute rather than a customer. We believe this power dynamic needs to shift. The city must assert its control and negotiate in its own best interest. Let's own rather than rent. Questions?
I'd like to make a comment before we go to questions. You know, we're in we've really kind of compressed this timeline because we're trying to meet this off-ramp in August of 2025. So in a rushed attempt to justify the off-ramp, the city has released the first option of just taking the city resources. This isn't the right choice. The right choice would be taking over the entire Black Hills Electric operation. These options should be evaluated before the vote. The best choice would be for Black Hills to become a willing seller. And then there would be a lot of utility interest. We could probably get a co-op to buy this territory because these events don't happen often. In my opinion, ask yourself if you're happy with Black Hills. Are you happy with all their advertisement lines? Are you satisfied paying the highest electric rates in the state? We had an opportunity to solve this 5 years ago, and the voters, out of fear, said no. We have a chance to do this again in the May election. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Please vote yes and not be shamed.
Any questions?
Council, any questions? Council Latino? In reference to the last request for an increase was 18%, wasn't that correct? The last increase from that, where they requested Black Hills Energies was 18%, right? Wasn't it?
Yes, that sounds right.
And prior to that was 40. When we got to 48%, at what point did we didn't just jump to 48% on one request? How long did it take to get to that 48%? Is that right? Do we know?
I'm not sure what your question is.
If
40
they wanted if we're paying 48% more, how did we get to that number?
Well, I think it started when Black Hills took over. One of the first things they did, they didn't go ask to buy their power from Xcel, which was kind of the previous power supply for our area. They used that opportunity to build the Pueblo Airport gas station, where they brought on some gas turbines, and in doing so, the rates doubled. Basically, that's where the 48% came on, and that put them on the top as being one of the most expensive utilities, and they've just continued to stay there.
Can we go back to the slide that shows that?
We're not up there yet. Okay.
Go all the way through it. Is that it? Right there. So right there is 209. They requested 40.2 million for PAGs. Cost them 400 million to build PAGs. And as you can see, they keep asking for more and more, and it's, in the millions. They don't get it all, but they got a lot. Right there, it says that they received 61.3 million.
Yeah, I think the reason is that investor-owned utilities have to get everything approved by the PUC. We have no voice in it. I mean, we can intervene and plead with the PUC not to do things. But the system was really designed by the investor-owned utilities, and they're always going to get a reasonable piece of what they ask for. So if we stay in this investor-owned utility model, we're always going to see this high rate of return. I mean, it used to be 8-9%. Now the model is 10.5%. Okay, that's what they're going to ask for. It's probably going to go up. It never goes down. So it would be nice to break away from Black Hills. I think with our neighbors in the county and Canyon City and other places across the area that use Black Hills, it would be nice to take the whole territory. If we could figure out a way to get Black Hills willing to sell their electric utility, that would be the fastest option.
Ken, do you have any estimates in reference to, if you look at the total system of Black Hills Energy? I read a couple of years back, they said 420 million. Well, that's a joke. That's a laugh now, but what would it take for somebody like an XL? Like I said, it's 10 times bigger than Black Hills Energy to absorb them. Do you have any numbers in reference to what the current value of that Black Hills Energy system is?
Well, I think that's why you're doing these studies, is to understand that. If you look back to 2020, when we were doing this, or 2019, San Isabel made an offer to buy the entire Black Hills territory. In that map that they showed about where the utilities are, San Isabel sits just below Black Hills. So, you know, it would be great for them because it gives them more meters. It makes their operation more efficient. They offered 1.8 billion and Black Hills refused.
That was in 2020.
Yeah.
2020. Has Excel shown any interest?
I don't, Excel's another investor-owned utility, so there's still that profit motive. It would be nice to.
And we still have to go through the PUC on everything. It's just like having Black Hills, except their rates are a little lower right now because they have a larger territory. That's why their rates are lower.
Okay, anybody else on council got anything else?
I did want to talk a little bit about the feasibility study and what was stated in the feasibility study. I noticed that they didn't say anything about not including PAGs in the condemnation process. Because the last time we did this, there was talk that we would not, there's a possibility that we would not condemn PAGs. And then another item was, now I'm losing my thought process. I forget what I was going to say.
The last time we did this, the consultant looked at bringing in renewable energy at a significant savings. They actually went out and got quotes. The energy market has changed. I think we heard that in the other presentation. I think PAGs is actually an asset that Black Hills would want to hang on to. We could always do a power purchase agreement with them, which is what you would do in a utility that may not have that generation resource. You'd buy it from another energy supplier.
Also, if we were required to purchase PAGs as part of the condemnation, we could always sell it. I mean, right now, Excel's needing something to replace Comanche 3. So that would be a possibility.
Does Black Hills Energy entertain working with other renewables such as solar, wind, natural gas, hydrogen? And I know Excel does it. I'm not sure if Black Hills does
Black
it.
Hills has some renewable resources.
Okay.
I mean, they have some wind resources in their clean air plan that I believe is still planned to be built. They're going to bring in a large amount of solar and battery storage. So
There was also a question about, I think Sarah brought it up, about how soon they would probably request another rate increase. And as you can see, I would say it'd be 3 years by just looking at what they've done in the past.
I would say rest assured that as soon as they can do it, they would do it.
And right now, they're up there trying to get a increase on demand side. It's right there. They're having the meeting this Wednesday to talk about that. So every time you look at one of the agendas that is going at PUC, Black Hills is always in it.
Okay.
I mean, they're a business, you know, they're out there to make profits and they do a pretty good job for their company.
Okay, anybody on council? Council Maestri?
Councilor Latino, go first.
Council Latino?
I have something here I'd like to say as it relates to that. And this was a comment from an individual who's extremely schooled in energy, having done the things that this particular individual has done in his career in energy. The individual said to me, if I had to say, or if I had prepared the 70% plus industrial rate Black Hills Energy charges that effectively kills any chance or chances to attract data centers and the high-tech jobs of this community. And that's exactly what this individual said, and I trust his intelligence and his integrity because he's from here, but he's worked in one of the 4 largest cities in the country in that area. Again, if I had prepared, I would have pro-offered the 70% plus industrial rate Black Hills Energy charges that effectively kills any chances to attract data centers and the high-tech jobs to this community. Sad, isn't it sad? Thank you.
Okay, Council Maestri.
We had the paid consultant come here tonight and give us their expert opinions of what's going on. And I just don't want the community to be confused because you guys are just members of our community. You're talking contract law, you're talking the franchise fee and so forth, but you're not attorneys, correct? And you're not credentialed in this. You're just citizens who are interested in knowing about energy, but you don't have a background like our consultants have. You don't have an education or a background, and you don't consult anywhere else. This is just an opinion that you're coming here today with.
It's a
This started out when I noticed that people were saying that we lose the franchise fee, that our electricity is going to be shut off. And that's when I said, well, I need to do a presentation to inform so that some of this misinformation that I'm hearing, I actually give them the correct information.
So this actually started out in the last time that we went through this, where you were for the initiative, the ballot initiative at that time. That's when it started. So this time you're just saying you're bringing it up because those 2 things that you're concerned about, we have a legal team here that can answer those questions and give those questions to the public. And
You do have a legal team, but unfortunately, we had Dan Jagosic, I believe, who was very knowledgeable about this energy situation and Black Hills. And he was terminated, and I'm not going to say, anything about that. And then we got Carla, and she was not totally up on all the information that Dan knew. Okay. And some of the city council, same way, you're new, you didn't know a lot of this stuff that we knew back in 2020. So that's why I did the presentation. And it sounds like you've gotten the information because you were saying electricity would be cut off, that you'd lose the franchise fee.
Nobody said that from
Yes.
our team.
I had heard it from somebody on the council and from Carla.
I think that they asked that question and, you know, we
Yes.
have we paid for Mr. Davidson to represent us and she has the, she can refer back to Mr. Davidson. He is the expert legal in all
Yes,
of
he
this,
is.
correct? Yeah, and so.
I'm not disagreeing
So
with you.
I would hope that Ms. Sykes' presentation here tonight was based off of conferring with him and not because you think that, you know, not conferring with you. So like I said, I just don't want to confuse the community that we have expert knowledge here given. This is a very touchy subject and what we have is a public opinion. And once we do that, then we have to like open it up for both sides for public opinion to come in. So, because there's a side, not everybody wants to know just if we want this as a community, because the people that don't want it as a community, I'm sure that they could come in with their opinion also. All right, thank you.
I would say that if you lived in the Dante house, we spent a lot of time on this energy stuff. We spent a lot of time talking to a lot of other people in the energy business. It's a pretty well-informed opinion, okay? It's not a knee-jerk reaction. You know, my background is an engineer. I graduated from Colorado School of Mines in engineering physics. I'm an electrical engineer. I know a lot about how to analyze these things. And this is not, it's complex because it involves, you know, big corporations and for-profit stuff. Obviously, some people are going to vote no on this. That's fine. It's your decision. I think the risk of a yes vote is pretty low because it opens the opportunity to study this more. A yes vote just opens the opportunity for study.
I just want to add something real quick. I hope you don't get discouraged in coming back because I've seen experts fail all the time. And the interest, how many times have you come to council, been in council chambers?
Typically, Diane and I here are every session.
Or how, I mean, it's been a long experience.
Years.
Yes.
Yeah. So I hope you don't get discouraged by that because I look forward to the legalese that you put in English very much, and I appreciate that. But for what's that's worth, we're gonna have to move on though, folks. We'll get Brett Boston. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brett.
Thank you, Chair. Not to dismiss what Councilor Meister was saying, but I would just like to remind everyone that Mr. Dante was the chairman of the Energy Advisory Committee. I would say he may not have the legal expertise or the exact expertise as the people we just commissioned to do the study, but he's not a novice in this either. So just like to give credit where credit's due.
Thank you.
And I would like to support that.
Well, that's
We're jumping
perfectly
at it. Hold
understandable.
on, let's hold on a second. Joe, you done? Okay, Regina, go ahead.
That's perfectly understandable. You know, I'm hoping that we never have to pursue condemnation because it's situations like this is where it doesn't matter if we're sitting on council at the time. We're sitting on council now when this is all taking place, and we could be sitting on the stand discussing this someday. Because it is adjudicated in a court of law. So thank you.
Mayor, you have anything? We good? All right, we're gonna move on, guys. Thank you for your presentation. Next, we've got City Council Board and Commission update, City Council, and a 15-minute presentation. Who the hell is doing that?
Councilor Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I serve on 3 and soon to be 4 commissions or boards. The first one that I'm very happy to be on is the HARP Authority Board. Just to give you an update, everything's moving forward on the boathouse. Everything looks good. If you drive by there, you can see it's taking shape and it looks good. We've heard presentations as a board on possible hotel sites going in down at the Riverwalk. Nothing is finalized on any of that, but we've heard the presentations. The Riverwalk is gearing up for the busy spring and summer season, and very much the staff is looking forward to that. There is Counselor Boston brought forward an idea about weekly festivals down at the Riverwalk, bringing together our entertainment district and are utilizing our entertainment district and trying to get the restaurants and bars and everybody to participate. I think we're starting off with baby steps for 2025. We're going to have 3 dates, as I know it, that will move forward with a festival. And hopefully that will morph into a bigger, better, as we move on year after year, into a huge experience every weekend down at the Riverwalk. And the HARP staff is very much involved in that and helping to move that forward. I'm also on PEDCO along with Counselor Flores, the Economic Development Company. And we're always hearing good presentations, things moving forward. I believe we'll hear more tonight on another one in an executive session, and we're hoping that 2025 is much better than 2024. I am the chairman of the Pueblo Area Council of Governments. We meet every month. All of City Council is a part of that. We handle primarily with transportation matters. We've done some good work. We've gotten some good feedback and back and forth with Colorado Department of Transportation when it comes to access fees and some of the things that are going on and the costs that are incurred by the city when it comes to economic development. Hopefully, we've opened some doors and creating some conversation and moving forward with that. And then on the 18th, I'll be back on, I was last year, on the Fountain Creek Watershed District. I'm looking forward to that. They do some good things here in Pueblo. They just finished, I believe, Mr. Hayes, they finished the deal back behind Walmart, didn't they? Bringing in the rocks and things. Yeah. So that was done over the last few months, and they're very, very active in Pueblo, and a lot of things are moving forward with that. And with that, that's my board updates.
Thank you, Chair. So the boards I sit on, I just recently got appointed to the Hart Foundation Board, so I have not been there yet, but Mark gave you a brief update on that. I'm also on the Urban Renewal Authority with Dennis Flores. Basically, the biggest things we've been working on as of late, we got the Da Vinci project passed, which you guys already know about. We got our bylaws passed, and we'll soon be doing elections to fill the rest of the membership committee. Past that, we purchased a couple of the city properties to do future development like they did with those duplexes earlier last year. Past that, let's see, just appointed a couple of people to different boards, and that was about it for Pura. I'm also on the Planning and Zoning Commission. A lot of fun things are going on there. Some of the things such as the psychedelics modifications that we asked for on council is one of the things that was reviewed and will be before us shortly. Another thing is a potential new Whataburger location on the north side on Dillon Drive. A few other things was the Dillon development going on there by the mall. A special site plan was looked at for that. Couple of road renamings, couple of little easement vacancies, and then a plan for a potential new low-income housing or something like that near Highway 50B bypass for some sort of affordable housing. Lots of units. They look pretty nice. That should be something beneficial coming on. And then let's see. There was one other thing, but I'm forgetting it. But yeah, those are the biggest things going on with planning and zoning.
Yes, thank you. I'm on the airport Advisory Board, and we've got some things moving forward in that particular area. There's a great potential for this airport to be something special. We've met with the mayor and with our chief of staff, Brian McCain, myself, and a couple of the members of the airport board. We have an air show coming this summer that will bring a lot of people, and it has a great potential of bringing other things to here. There's individuals from across the state that are wanting to put hangars here in Pueblo. There's some things we have to do, and again, we're working on that, and the mayor has been gracious enough to help us with that at this point to get some things done at that airport that need to be done. Guidance and direction are an important thing. Again, there's a great potential there, and there's individuals that are willing to come here to Pueblo and establish their hangars and bring their personal jets down here to Pueblo. So there's again a great amount of potential. There's some things that we need to work on in terms of management and have a strategic plan to move forward with that. Thank you.
Yes, I sit on the Regional Building Department Board, and I got on there as we're getting our new building chief. He was there for about a year before I came onto the board, and so transitioning him into his position and so forth, working with him because he needed to do some testing to get certified in his position, and he accomplished all of that. And really, the board hired someone that hadn't worked at the building department before to kind of work on the culture of the building department. And so he's worked really hard and they've all collectively seemed to be working really well together. I championed HR services. They didn't have HR services in place. I championed that, found a few referrals for them to look into. So they've implemented HR program into their organization. They're just trying to get everything up and running with Pueblo Place so that they can collectively work together with all the departments to get permits and so forth issued in a timely manner. And so, we're working to support him in improving the way Pueblo Regional operates down there. And so it seems to be a really good transition. And I enjoy being on that board.
Councilman Flora.
I get to serve on Pueblo Urban Renewal Authority with Councilman Boston, and he pretty much covered everything we're doing. I'm a little bit excited about forming a closer partnership of raising a lot of these abandoned houses and burnt out houses, and utilizing their expertise, combining it with the city. And we're hoping you're going to see more of that going forward. I also get to serve on Pueblo, the PETCO board, Pueblo Economic Development Organization. And I serve with President Aliff on that board. And right now there's a lot of stuff going on. They've got 2 potential prospects. We're hoping, we're at the top of the list on these, and hopefully something will happen toward this summer that we have some success with these 2. The other thing is that PETCO is currently in the process of working toward a November election so that the citizens can continue the half-cent sales tax they provide to bring in primary jobs to Pueblo. So very, very busy time for them. I also serve on the Front Range Passenger Rail District, and that board is very, very active right now. Their goal, obviously, just to refresh your memory, this is the dream of having passenger rail service from Fort Collins all the way to Trinidad. And so trying to get all 13 counties that are involved in this has proven to be pretty interesting, but Pueblo's on board. We've done a lot of things of selecting our old depot as the main station for Pueblo. And so everything that's happening on the Front Range Passenger Rail District really involves preparing for a ballot issue in November of 2026. So that's a year and a half away. This is a huge undertaking and would involve a state tax that would fund the capital construction that it's going to take to put that together. And the only other board I serve on is PACOG, and that's an organization that we all serve on that brings all the local governments together and currently are working and getting updates on all the current Colorado highway projects that they're working on. And hopefully at our next meeting, I'll have maybe some direct information about the kinds of things that they're doing on a more comprehensive basis. But that's all I have. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the boards that I sit on is the Pueblo City County Library District Appointee Board, which is kind of exciting because you actually appoint the people that are going to be serving on the library board for the city and the county. Last year, gosh, we filled it felt like 3 different positions, but this year there's only 1 position that's going to be coming open at the end of the year. So if you're interested in serving on the library board, keep that kind of on your radar that application will be coming open soon. I also serve on the Commission on Housing and Homelessness, which was talked about at the February retreat. President Aliff has decided to take that task on and kind of revamping, reshaping it. So the group itself has been on hold as council is deciding on how to move forward with that. And then I also represent the city on the Latino Chamber Board of Commerce, which is super exciting. A couple of updates there. One, the 5th annual 40 Under 40 awards are going to be taking place Saturday, June 14th at CSU Pueblo. The honorees have been released, and there's actually several city representatives who are on that list, including Councilor Boston and City Clerk Stoller. So that's pretty exciting. The Junior Latino Chamber program will take place in the month of July. And this specific program actually teaches middle school students how to create a business, and then they receive a paycheck after the program. So it's a really good way to kind of build skills and that mentoring opportunity for middle schoolers as it relates to entrepreneurship and small business and things like that. The Latinos Chamber is also hosting a get to know your community resource workshops. They're happening on a monthly basis. And one of the requested things that we're working on right now is a lot of small business owners are needing help kind of navigating the city licensing department. So we've asked to connect our resident city sales expert, Val, to give a workshop on all things city sales tax processes. The Latino Chamber Board is working on implementing a corporate advisory council for members in the coming months. So stay tuned on that. I can update you all after that kind of takes shape. And then they're working on translating other resources and informational things in a bilingual format. And they're going to be hosting a few immigration rights roundtable discussions as well. So I think that they're definitely staying true to their mission. It's been really cool for me. It's my first time at kind of representing the city in at a business sector. So I'm really enjoying that opportunity. So those are the boards that I sit on, and those are the updates for you all. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, anybody else? Let me just throw something real quick in reference to some of the program development I'm working on. Starts with STOPS, sharing team-oriented policing in public and private. That's a program I've got working with two organizations. One of them is the security firm of DC Investigations. I've been working on that. Also working on TOPS, which is a tennis outreach player support center for kids. And that's going to be under a program called First Volley. And I've done a lot of program development, so these are things we're working on. Also working on the business safety plan in reference to some of the park things we're going to do, investment we're going to bring forward. I also worked with the urban renewal in reference to the demolition infill redevelopment task force, and I've given that project over to them because we had the same kind of goals in mind. And then finally taking this position on as work sessions keeps me pretty busy. But other than that, does anybody have anything else they'd like to add? Mayor, anything? Okay, I think we're good. Mark, we're ready to go into the motion for the.
Mr. Chair, I move that we go into executive session for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and or instructing negotiators under CRS section 24-6-402, parent 4, parent E, parent I, and to discuss the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interest pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, parent 4, parent A, and more fully described as follows: to discuss the sale of commercial property related to a potential Petco prospect.
Second, okay, and then those for?
Aye.
Those against? We're good? All right, we're gonna be back, what time, Mark? Let's see, we got 8:02. Let's make it what?
There's no time limit.
Yeah.
Okay. We're not gonna come back in here? What time is it? The meeting's adjourned at 8:32 PM. Thank you. Don't forget to feed your pet.